getting caught up on some of the more recent Sword and Laser book club picks. This time, one of the, um, I'll say first, but look, I haven't read much in terms of YA in a while, and so I'm trying to make up with that with Akata Witch by Nnedi Okorafor. Now, Akata Witch as a book moves very quickly and introduces its world very well. Um, Now, to get elaborate on this a little bit, I need to bring up a comparison that at first brush seems a little unfair, but bear with me. On the Sword and Laser Discord, there were some comparisons to they're made to Harry Potter. This is not a reasonable comparison. Um, this owes about as much to Harry Potter as it owes to Wizard of Earthsea, in that it's a book about a young adult learning magic. What And I remember when this comparison came up, I thought about it a bit. I'm not going to say it was living rent free in my head, but it stuck around a while, and I thought about it, and I figured out what is the thing that makes it the closest parallel I have to Harry Potter. And it isn't much, but it is that the book makes no assumptions about its world. Or I should say, is not so much makes no assumptions, but as far as makes no assumptions as to the reader's ignorance, as far as assumes they're coming from a place of ignorance, and thus has to explain everything. Harry Potter is a British boarding school fantasy combined with a wizard school story, and Weenet and J.K. Rowling, for all her faults as an author, like basically went to this when writing the story came the perspective of my audience is familiar with British culture because they're British. They're familiar with white middle class British society, that the kind that Harry's foster parent, adoptive parents come from, because that is a cultural norm. The assumptions that is the default is a cultural norm, because she is from a white middle class or higher background, and she doesn't need to explain the concepts of the boarding school fantasy or even the British boarding school, because she assumes that that's what the audience already knows about, that they have read plenty of British boarding school stories before, or just boarding school stories in general, and so they don't have to explain it. She doesn't have to explain it again. She assumes you know. And Nnedi Okorafor, on the other hand, basically because I don't need to explain to you, I don't feel like I have to explain to you what explain to you Nigeria. I'm not explaining to you living in Nigeria. She just describes it as it is and doesn't have to go into any big elaborate detail on what the Nigerian school system is like, or how transit in Nigeria works, public transit in Nigeria works, or taxis, or any of that sort of thing. Any of the ways where Nigeria is different from the day-to-day lived life experience uh, of a person in the United States, either just a white person or just a person in the U.S. in general, or a person in the UK in general. Even with the main character being someone who is Nigerian American, not just African American, but from her parents are from Nigeria and who came from the U.S. to Nigeria. So with that in mind, uh, that situation, like that's the closest parallel, but it's a useful thing to mention, especially since this episode is coming up in Black History Month, where this is a work which, I mean, not only is it just from a black author, but it is also one which doesn't feel like it needs to explain anything about the day-to-day lived life experiences of a non-white person in a non-white majority country. Um, with a non-white majority country with a different median economic level necessarily than, or a different perceived, I should say, median economic level compared to the assumptions of a middle class white person in the United States. or even for that matter, middle class black person in the United States. So, with that in mind, um, like on the one hand, this shouldn't feel like it's a breath of fresh air. This should be the default. If I read a story set uh in Seoul, South Korea, or set in Mumbai, or set in uh in in Vietnam or Cambodia or in the Philippines or in I'm falling back on Asian countries, but also like anywhere in Africa, in Liberia, um, Liberia's not much of a country anymore. In like anywhere in Africa, um, Sierra Leone, uh, what have you, in the Congo, I I shouldn't I shouldn't have to, or I shouldn't feel that it is bad that the book didn't go into full elaborate detail on the day-to-day life of the characters, because the assumption that I am not from that background and thus need to have it all explained to me like a stupid because I'm a stupid white person. Um, readers, and related to this, readers out of the white Anglo-American cisgendered heterosexual norm should be able to find themselves in fiction. However, that said, look, I'm recording this video before the inauguration of Donald Trump. It will go up after. It will go up in February during Black History Month. But I'm writing this. I wrote the script and the blog post version of the review, and I'm recording this now before Trump is made office. But I'm also doing it after waves and waves of book bannings have struck I've gone across the United States, including in my state of Oregon, including in my county, which is in the Portland metro area. And they have targeted books with uh, Black, Indigenous, people of color as protagonists, including characters and stories set from outside the United States. And this needs to be highlighted, that this type of this writing should be more normalized and should be something that people can easily find and read. And more so because this book is really good. I am deliberately being vague about the plot details because I don't want to spoil things. And this book was a really brisk week, partially because it's aiming for a YA audience, but partially because it has a level of breadth to the story, and or swiftness to how the narrative goes, that doesn't, without leaving any of the characters and their characterization behind, without failing to explain the things that need to be explained about the world, about the magical side of things. Which is, again, wonderfully fleshed out, really great stuff. I like one of the bits I loved about it that I do want to talk about it real quick is like the magical world in this story is one of what are referred to in the story of the leopard people, is one where the currency that you get from learning things, from and not just like learning magical things, but like just having new experiences, meeting new people, learning about new cultures and that sort of thing. And that is a wonderful thing. And also, like, unlike Harry Potter, this is a world where the magical and the mundane coexist really well. We get to have this interplay, which Harry Potter goes out of its way to keep the magical world and mundane world separated in really dumb and obnoxious ways, to maintain a fascistic element to that society that I don't like, but also, as we've learned with time, goes rather nicely with J.K. Rowling's worldviews. Um, and there's enough left on the margins of the world and the antagonists to be fleshed out in sequels. And if you are worried about the Netflix season finale problem of this has sequel hooks that never get paid off, there are 2 sequels out already. I am planning to read those hopefully in the not too distant future. Um, and once you hit the last few chapters of the book, as you start getting towards the climax, you are not going to want to stop to anything. This is the part where, if I was going to raise a complaint, I would say I wish the book was longer, but again, there are sequels. I know I can get more. So I know there's more to read when I want it. So I strongly recommend picking up this book, and hopefully, if you enjoyed it, picking up the sequels as well. It is available through your local booksellers, through bookshop.org, independent online booksellers through Libris. I will have links in the doobly-doo for various places where you can get it. I really recommend you pick it up.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. And also consider backing my Patreon. Patreon backers get episodes up to 1 week early of this show and any future Let's Plays. Also, please consider backing my Ko-fi. Tossing me a few bucks also helps support the show, and it's not a monthly obligation or anything like that.